Now let's look at working with variables in C# using Visual Studio. This is a console application that I have open right here. And a variable is basically a container that holds a value. A variable is a container that holds a value. And with respect to computers, it's actually a place in memory where a value is held. And variables can have many types. I'm going to use 4 variable types in this console application, 4 very common ones. And you can write most programs using just these 4 variable types. The first variable type is an integer. An integer is a number, can be negative or positive, but it will not have any decimal places. And integers do include 0. Negative 520 is an integer, 10 is an integer, 5,000 is an integer, 0 is an integer, 12 is an integer. But 3.5 is not an integer. 6.9 is not an integer. Okay? So now we know what a variable is. How do we create a variable? Well, we create a variable first by typing the reserved keyword of the variable type. And integer variable types are int. So first, the type of variable, and this is an int variable, followed by the name of the variable. And I want a variable to store dog age. And when we're naming variables, we name them with camel case. Camel case means that the first word will be all lowercase, and every subsequent word will have its first letter capitalized. That's why we see a lowercase d here and a capital A here. And with every line of code in C#, we end it with a semicolon. And so all this has done is created a space in memory to hold dog age. It doesn't have a value assigned to it yet. Before we assign values, let's go down here and declare a string variable. And so I want a variable to store the name of my dog. The name of my dog is Finn. The problem is Finn is not an integer. Finn is not a negative or a 0 or a positive number. So we need to represent our dog's name with a string. And a string is any combination of characters, of alphabetic characters and numbers. And so that works for the name of a dog. And this is a string variable, so I'm going to start with the word string. Notice that gets put in blue. That means it's a reserved C# keyword. And so I'm going to call this variable dog name and end that with a semicolon. Again, I'm camel case here, so lowercase d, capital N. Alright, so now let's go back up to our dog age variable. We've declared a couple variables. How do we assign values to these? Well, very simply. So dog age equals 8. And this is confusing to a lot of people when they first start programming because they think that the line of code should look something like this. 8 equals my dog age, and that doesn't work because of how this equal sign works. This equal sign is called the assignment operator in C#, and what it does is it says take whatever is on the right of the equal sign and put it into whatever is on the left of the equal sign. So now you can see why this doesn't work. Take whatever on the left or on the right of the equal sign and put it into this. That doesn't make sense. But take whatever on the right of the equal sign and put it into this. That makes sense to us. Okay? So that's one way of doing it, and let's assign a name to our dog. And so we'll type in here dog name equals Finn. Okay. And since code is compiled sequentially, whatever the last value for any particular variable is, that's what the value is going to be. And so if I write another line of code here that looks like this, and I run some other lines of code down here, and I want to call call up what is my dog age. Dog age is actually going to be 7. It's going to, this line of code is going to overwrite the value for dog age, which used to be 8 and now is 7. All right, let's go down to a double variable. Now, a double variable is a way of a variable we can use to represent numbers that do have decimal places in them. And so the weight of my dog, in pounds, that could be represented with decimal places. A dog could be 8.5 pounds. So this is going to be a double variable. Double is our reserved keyword, followed by our variable name, which I'm going to call dog weight. Again, I'm using camel case here. And I'm going to demonstrate something here I didn't do before. In a single line of code, I can declare the variable and give a value to the variable. So what I've done right here, I'm going to show you another way of doing it. I could have done this. So these two lines of code here do the same thing that this single line of code does. Exactly the same. And this is called initializing a variable. So when we create a variable and assign it a value, we are initializing the value of that variable to something. And finally, a Boolean variable. A Boolean variable can contain a value of true or false, and only true or false. Other programming languages, a Boolean could be a 0 or a 1, or a yes or a no, but in C#, a Boolean can only be true or false. And the prefix for a Boolean variable is bool, or the data type. And I want to create a variable that represents if my dog is living or not. So again, I'm using camel case. First word lowercase, every subsequent word has the first letter capitalized. So a capital I and a capital L. So dog is living. And frequently with Boolean variables, you'll see that word is in the variable name. And that gives you a hint that this is probably a Boolean variable when you're seeing it later in the code. And so dog is living, let's set that equal to true. Notice that true shows up in blue. That's a reserved keyword. And so right now I've written a lot of code here. I've written, I don't know, 8 or so lines of code. And down here at the bottom, I didn't show you this before, but all I'm doing is waiting for the user to press a key to terminate the program. I prompt them with this console.write line, and console.read key is waiting for the next key press on my keyboard. So when I run this, I wrote all those lines of code, but nothing's showing up yet. And that's because declaring variables and assigning values to them isn't necessarily going to create any output. And so now I want to display some information about that dog from the variables that I declared up here. And I'm going to do that with console.write line. And the first thing I want to display on the console is dog age. Next thing I want to display on the console is the dog's name, followed by the weight and if they're living. Okay, so now we're going to have some output when I run this. And remember, I first set dog age equal to 8, and then I changed its value to 7. So when this line of code down here runs, we should see 7 outputted to the console and not 8, because 7 is the most current value for that dog age variable. So now let's run this, and we'll get some more exciting things on our in our console. First, we're seeing our dog age of 7. That looks good. Our dog's name of Finn. That looks good too. That weight of 8.5 pounds. And then true is displayed because the dog is in fact living. And so that's not very exciting. All we've done is declared some variables and assigned some values to them and printed them to the console. But something else you can do with numeric variables is we can do math on them. And so we know that when we're calculating dog years, that's going to be human years times 7 to calculate dog years for a dog. And so let's do that. Let's first declare a new variable, a new integer variable for dog years. And then let's set the value of dog years equal to dog age multiplied by 7. The asterisk in C# represents multiplication, and dog age, we are taking a number 7 and multiplying it by a variable. And that works because this variable represents a number. And our value up here for dog age is 7. Let's change that to something other than 7, so we're not multiplying 7 by 7. Let's say the dog is 5 years old. And so after this line of code is compiled, dog years should be equal to 35, right? 7 times 5. And now let's display that information in the console so we can see if our math was correct here. Okay, and so now we should see 35 at the end of our console, and there it is, 35. So our math worked correctly, and we were able to output that to the console. Last thing I want to demonstrate here is what's called a token. And a token is something that you can put in a console.writeLine and actually many other places in C#. And a token represents a value, and that token is going to be replaced with the value when that line of code gets run. And so I'll demonstrate this to you. So up here, this line of code really just outputted the number 35, and that's not very helpful. I want to display to the user, your dog is 35 in dog years. That's a nicer output than just the number 35. So we can do that with a token. So here I have your dog is, and then a token is going to be a number starting with 0 and surrounded by curly braces. So what's going to happen when this code is compiled is open curly brace 0, closing curly brace is going to be replaced with whatever I put after a comma after my string in this console.writeLine list of arguments. So I want to display dog years in here. So now when this runs, your dog is 35 in dog years. That's what we should see on the console. Let's give it a run and test that out. And isn't that nice? Your dog is 35 in dog years. Looks much better than this straight up 35 we had in the console. And you're not limited to a single token in a statement like this. Let's say instead of your dog is so much in dog years, how about we actually put the name of the dog? So Finn is however many years old in dog years. And we use a zero-based numbering system, so the first token is actually going to be token index 0, and the second token is going to be token index 1. And so the first item after the comma corresponds to token 0, and after the second comma corresponds with token index 1. So in here, I want to put dog name. So now this should say Finn is 35 in dog years, and that's even more descriptive. And there it is. And just to demonstrate, we could change these names. Let's say we have a dog called Winston, and Winston is getting on in years. Winston is 9 human years old. Let's see what our output says now. Winston is 63 in dog years, getting on in age. Winston's a senior citizen.